and I'll bring him on in just a minute. And I think he's here, so I'm going to just bring him on and show him on the screen here. And there he is. Good morning or good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Jacqueline.
Well, I'm so glad that you can join us. I was just telling the viewers a little bit about my background before starting my company, that I worked for a 5-star, 5-diamond hotel in Palm Beach called The Breakers. And I haven't given away the secret of where you work yet. We're going to be very incognito today. No, and that's one of the questions that I'll ask you. But while you are with us, I'm just going to give a brief introduction about you. And Jeff Wielgopolan is the Senior Vice President of Learning and Development for, are you ready for this? Forbes Travel Guide. And I know a lot of our viewers are going to be very interested in hearing what you have to say about the travel industry and how it's changed since COVID. But since joining Forbes Travel Guide in 2005, so you've been there quite a while, Jeff has served as the Senior Manager of the Quality Assurance Division. He has also served as an Incognito Inspector, and now Senior Vice President of Learning and Development. And in his current role, Jeff works with the finest hotels, restaurants, and spas across the world to improve service, staff confidence, and knowledge, and to further properties' understanding of Forbes Travel Guide star ratings standard. Welcome, Jeff.
Thank you. Thank you again. It's nice to be here.
Oh, well, I'm just super excited to have you. And I was telling our viewers before you came on how I came to discover you. And of course, in the travel industry, Forbes is a big, big name. And you all have a beautiful website. And I want to dive into that a little bit deeper about what you do at Forbes Travel Guide. But before I do that, I would like you to tell our viewers a little bit about where you grew up, the landscape of your childhood, and how you became interested in the hospitality industry.
Sure. So if I'm going to walk down memory lane a little bit here. I was born and raised in Chicago, like in the city of Chicago. And I grew up in the same house as my parents, my grandparents, and my great-grandparents, along with my brother. So we had 4 generations under one roof. And something I think is sort of framed my love of hospitality is that my grandmother every Sunday would host these huge dinner parties at our house. And it would invite all my aunts and my uncles and my cousins, and would have this enormous spread of food. Something that she instilled in me to this day is that if you have just the perfect amount of food, then clearly that was wrong. You should always have leftovers, right?
Right.
And like the kids would all play, the adults would play cards, and it was just a really very fond memory of my own childhood, but also instilled in me the idea that you can create like this happiness, right? Like just by being a host or by serving. And I would pretend to open up my own little restaurant, or it'd say like Jeff's, and pretend to serve dinner. And then it's sort of like I just got the bug. And then when my grandmother passed away, I went to lunch at the Chicago Club, which was a private club in downtown Chicago that she was an accountant for, and her then boss invited us to lunch, my mom and I, as like a thank you to my grandmother for all of her years of service. And he asked, did I have a job? I was like, no. He's like, would you like one? Like, yes. I was, I think, 15 or 16 at the time.
Wow.
And I became a front desk agent at this club. And one day I remember him standing across from me and saying, is there anything that you'd like to do? Have you thought about where you're going to go to college? What you're going to do? And I said, yes, I want to go to Cornell. And it's like, oh, I went to Cornell. It's great. And he's like, what are you going to major in? And I was like, oh, I want to be an English major. Like, oh, that's really interesting. Well, what do you plan on doing after graduation? It's like, oh, I want to open up my own restaurant. I was like, why wouldn't you go to the hotel school? and I had never even heard that such a thing existed. I knew I didn't want to go to culinary school. I knew I wanted to do something different. So applied to the hotel school, got in, and then sort of the rest is in my bio.
Well, I'm interested in knowing what a vacation looked like for you as a child. Did your parents take you on lavish vacations? What did a typical getaway look like for your family? Because as you said, you had quite a few generations living under the same roof.
No, we did not. We did not go to over the top lavish vacations by any means. I think that when we were kids, my brother and I would hop into the station wagon, and my dad would drive us to Florida, and we'd spend 2 weeks in St. Pete Beach, and probably like a Howard Johnson's or something. And my brother and I would basically sleep the whole way there and back. But I think that was it. I mean, we'd just see some family in Michigan and see in some other areas of Illinois, but it was pretty straightforward. I guess maybe how I got into sort of like more of a luxury environment is that when I graduated from college, a very famous professor at Cornell, his name's Giuseppe Pizzotti, gave me a little piece of advice and said, if you really want to succeed in hospitality, I'm going to say something to you that I don't say to everybody, but it's going to kill your parents, but don't become a manager. When you graduate, find a really great restaurant and become a waiter and just learn. And you'll climb that ladder faster if you do that than if you start as a 22-year-old manager and not really know much. So I was really fortunate that, I was very hungry to learn about service and had a great attention to detail. And so went to go work for a company called Let Us Entertain You. And sure enough, I started as a bartender, and then I was a front waiter, and then I was a captain. And then I think I was 24, 25 when I was the dining room director of, a multi-James Beard Award winning restaurant. So the idea that, from a luxury perspective, that, you're there to create a memory, you're there to create traditions, and that there's like a way to do something is, definitely hooked me right from the start.
That's something that you and I both have in common, because when we were talking during the pre-interview, I was telling you about my entree into the hospitality industry. And I just graduated from University of Florida, and I certainly didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. But I did have great administrative skills. I could type, and my mother always insisted that I take typing in school. And she said, if you know how to type, you can get any job in the world. And I started out as a secretary or administrative assistant, if you will, in the sales department for the Walt Disney World Dolphin Hotel before they even opened the hotel. And so I think the advice that your mentor gave you was probably the best advice anybody can ever give you, because I think when young people graduate from college now, they just feel like they can go into management and they want to go into management, but you have to have that experience working with people. Don't you agree?
Oh, 100%. It's interesting because when I think of, when I graduated, you spend 4 years, but you're there, but your brain the entire time is being trained to think like a general manager, to think like you own the place, to think like you run it. And so then when you graduate, you think like, oh, I'm going to go run it. And it's like, no, you actually need to take a step back. So I wish that hospitality schools instilled that a little bit more in their students, that when you graduate, you're not going to be the general manager, nor do you want to be. Right? But there was actually, I just thought of something else that, maybe has sort of framed my way of thinking is I remember when I was a junior in high school, my parents, I don't remember like what special occasion it was, but we went to dinner at the dining room at the Ritz-Carlton. And I'd been reading so much about this restaurant. It was a big deal for us to go. And this is when like the dining room was like the place to go across the United States, the dining room in San Francisco and Atlanta and Chicago. And I remember we were at the very ending of our meal, and my mom ordered some decaf coffee, and they brought out something that was probably like heavy cream or maybe half and half. They put it down in front of her, and I remember her picking up the creamer and sort of like looking at it and then just putting it down, saying like, no, I actually don't want that. In maybe a minute or two, someone came over with a whole tray of little creamers and said, like, here we have skim milk, 2% whole milk, and just presented my mom with a whole selection. And I remember the three of us, my mom, my dad, and myself, just kind of looked at each other like, how is there a microphone underneath our table? Like, how did he know that? And so I've always been like, I've always thought like, I want to do that. I want to learn how to just read someone's mind and think 5 steps ahead of them, to where like you can get that surprise and delight and that awe of it just being able to not even ask a question, but just by reading someone's body language or listening to like the tone of their voice or whatever it may be. But to create that wow moment was very compelling.
Oh, I think that we can all remember the first time we went to someplace nice and something like that happened. It really does make an impact, and it sticks in your memory. And much like you, I remember going to a fancy restaurant when I was a senior in high school. It was back then, it was the Contemporary Hotel at Disney.
I remember that with the monorail that ran through it.
Yes,
I
and
guess it's still there, right?
they had a restaurant at the very top called Top of the World, and they had a cabaret show, and I thought that was the grandest thing known to man. And that was the first time I ever ordered lobster, and I was a senior in high school. I had never eaten lobster in my life, and it was just, the presentation was so beautiful, and the ambiance was so just something that I wasn't accustomed to, because I grew up with a single mom in a small town, and like you, I liked nice things early on. And so for our viewers who are just tuning in, many of them don't even know what Forbes Travel Guide is. If they haven't worked in the hospitality industry, maybe they've heard the name Forbes, but can you tell our viewers what Forbes Travel Guide really is, and what you do there right now currently?
Yes, absolutely. So, to make this very easy, if you've ever heard of a 5-star hotel, well, we're the organization that awards those. So Forbes Travel Guide used to be a company called the Mobile Travel Guide. So we started back in 1958. So almost technically speaking, on a global level, we are the world's second oldest global rating company. We'll give Michelin the credit that they deserve. They've got 57 years on us. But, just like Michelin created a guide to get people on the road to use their tires, we created a guide to get people on the road to use our gas. And then in 2009, we changed our name from Mobile to Forbes. Something that many people don't know is that Forbes Travel Guide is not owned or operated by Forbes. We are actually an independently held company that just licenses our Forbes name onto our brand. And of course, we have licensing agreements and shared content and all of that good stuff. But buying a 4-page spread in Forbes magazine for your hotel doesn't warrant you a 5-star rating. They're actually completely independent companies. So what myself and my colleagues do is, of course, from a rating perspective, we award 5 stars, 4 stars, and recommended to hotels, restaurants, and spas around the world. It is an extremely difficult award to get. We only have a little less than 500, it's about 480 4-star hotels and about 280 5-star hotels. So if you're thinking about a 5-star hotel and there's about 280 of them, there are about 64,000 hotels just in the United States. So if you're thinking about this on a global level, you're maybe 1 out of 283 out of a million, right? So it's really signifying the absolute top, best of the best. If you ever wanted to know what an incognito inspector looks like, well, here's a good look at one, because I used to be one. And then, After years of traveling, about a decade ago, we founded a learning and development division where we work directly with hotels and restaurants and spas, to luxury residential, to luxury retail, to private aviation, to really get to instill a sense of confidence in the team, to teach them how to think like a luxury guest, to anticipate, to show that, how do we genuinely show interest in somebody. And it's not necessarily so much about teaching a standard, but it is like, how are we creating an experience for our guest? I'll always mention that if you go to a 5-star hotel, you don't check in, you arrive. You could check in at any hotel, but you arrive at a 5. Like, where's that feeling come from? Where is it, like, that sense of magic that you start to get from the space? But they're not only the space, but like the staff. Like, how are they taking care of you?
And how do you coach people to take care of their guests? Let's take our viewers through a typical mindset of what a guest should experience when they drive up that beautiful driveway to a 5-star hotel. What should they be seeing and feeling and hearing? And I mean, I know you utilize every sense that a person has.
Right. And, maybe that I love the idea that you just mentioned, that we create a sense of place. And so in order to do that, you're right, you have to appeal to as many senses of a guest as possible. So when you're driving up, like, what should you see? You should see, staff have a sense of urgency. If the goal will not get you to think, then as someone just sort of like, as you're driving up, you're probably wondering, like, where do I go? Where do I park? If someone looks through that windshield, sort of like guiding you in and letting you know where to stop, like, okay, we've already made a positive impression and we haven't even said a word to the guest. When you open the door, what's your greeting? Is it, good afternoon, how may I assist you? Or, good afternoon, welcome to the Four Seasons Houston. That provide you with that immediate sense of place, that now you could see where you are, now you hear where you are. When you walk in, can you smell it? Can you touch it? Is there a welcome beverage so you can taste it? What's a handoff like? Are we asking you questions just to ask you questions, where the doorman's asking you, like, oh, Ms. Whitmore, how was your trip in? Where did you travel in from? What brings you to the hotel? And this is your first time staying with us? And the front desk agent looks at you and says, like, oh, Ms. Whitmore, welcome. Is this your first time staying with us? How was your trip in? What brings you to the hotel? Where did you travel in from? And then the doorman or the bellman escorting you to your room walks in and says, Ms. Whitmore, how was your trip in? Where did you travel in from? And it's just like, now you're sort of getting checked out as a guest because everything is so robotic and no one's thinking about, like, the actual experience. They're just working in their own individual silo. So how is it that as a guest, you're once again, we're framing the experience. We're not just working with an individual department. So getting the team to think like a guest.
And I think too, to add to that, number one, the sweetest sound to anyone's ear is their own name. And how do they remember their name, the name, and where did that, I've been in hotels where, I know the secrets because I've worked for a 5-star hotel, but most people don't understand how they know a guest's name. So, can you share that secret?
Sometimes, and the way that I always learned it is you just actively listen to yourself and just say it out loud. And sometimes you can just say a word or say someone's name, and then 5 seconds later, you've forgotten it. You look at a person like, what was your name again? Like, this happens to us at cocktail parties when we could remember what it was like to go out to bars, right? Yes. Sometimes if you just say, I go Ms. Whitmore, and just take a moment to just digest it, okay, like, this is Ms. Whitmore. Or you may have like some sort of mnemonic clue or something along those lines, but sometimes just saying it out loud just imprints in your brain. And the more you practice, the easier it becomes.
And luggage tags help too, don't they?
Luggage tags help, yes. Like all those little clues of, I don't know, sometimes someone would be standing or sitting at a table or at the front desk, and it's like, how do you know your name? It's like, well, you're wearing a lanyard with your name like literally written across it. It's actually pretty easy to figure it out.
Yes, absolutely. Well, one of the things that I want to point out to the viewers is that it's a 5-star doesn't mean that it's just a nice building. I mean, we all know that the grounds have to be immaculate, and there has to be flowers in the lobby, and it's nice to have little welcome juices when people walk in, and it has to be clean and tidy. But I think what really separates the 5-star from the 4-star, and please correct me or share with me your thoughts, is the level of service one receives. And it starts with the people that the guest encounters from the time they drive up to the time they leave the hotel. Everyone who touches a bag comes in contact with the guest, and the check-in process has to be so seamless and polite. And what are your thoughts on that?
I 100% agree. So the way that even the rating works is that, it's only 25% based off your facility. So you can build a really beautiful hotel, but you have to fill it with people who really care about a guest experience. And that's what makes up 75% of your overall rating. So it's an enormous, enormous emphasis on service. And something that's also pretty unique about the way that the rating system works is that there are no deal breakers in a report. So in a hotel inspection, you have 500 standards. So if you don't have fresh flowers because your hotel is super modern and really contemporary and it doesn't match the design, all right. Well, one, that's not even a standard, but it could be like an expectation of like the overall picture of what you want your hotel to look like. Mm-hmm. But if you're not going to offer something, then sort of make it up in some other way. Where this becomes a bit interesting is the way that all of the standards work is that they're 100% a yes or a no. So if you meet a doorman, a front desk agent, and a bellman upon arrival, and 2 out of those 3 people are in a clean uniform, if 2 out of those 3 people use your name, if 2 out of those 3 people are well spoken, all of those standards are no's. Like the hotel gets no points. So you're almost as strong as
be 100%.
It's got to be 100% a yes or it's a no. And sort of almost like the way that we think about it is that if you went to dinner and you ordered coffee with your dessert and there was a big lipstick mark on your coffee cup, no guest says, well, everything else I ate and drank off was clean, so I'll just drink out of the other side. Sort of like the only thing that ever matters in service is the thing that's not like everything else. So you're only really as strong as like the weakest person in that hotel, because that one person has the ability to change all of those yeses into nos. So when you start talking about a 5, we're really thinking like that it's consistent. Like everybody's on the same page with the quality of service that you should get.
Well, let's talk about customer service for just a moment, because I know that falls under training and development. And nowadays, I believe that when you're starting out in the hospitality industry, let's take a bellman, for example, or let's take someone who opens the front door, or even the front office staff. They're not the most highly paid individual with the hotel, but yet they are oftentimes the first person of contact, and that they're oftentimes the first person who will either make or break that particular guest experience. So how do you take someone who's I would say younger than me, let's just say a 20-something, who's inexperienced, who has never had an etiquette course in his or her life, who's never even traveled outside of their hometown. How do you train someone to have that level of service when you're working with someone from, let's just say, a modest background?
So I think that what's probably most important, and you and your viewers, I'm sure have heard this phrase, but you hire for attitude and you can train for aptitude, right? That all you really have to do is just be nice.
Yes.
And so at the end of the day, like that's what it's about. We can train people on how to enter someone's information, or how to check someone in, or how to check an opera profile, and you can do all of that. But what you can't train is for people just to be genuine and be nice. I think that what's really fascinating is often in our industry, we get very good at training people to ask questions, but we're not very good at training people to be genuine enough to listen to the answer. So I've experienced countless times where someone at the front desk will ask me, so how did you enjoy your stay with us? And I'll say like, oh, it was amazing, thank you. And the response will be, well, please take a look at your folio here and just make sure your charges listed here are correct. That's it. Okay, well, you asked me a question, you heard my answer, and then you changed the subject. So like, is that because of you, or is that because you have been trained? Like, make sure you ask the guest this question, and then in an effort to be efficient and get somebody checked out in a quick amount of time, that we forget to engage somebody. So, I think that's, if we brought someone behind the front desk because they're nice, now we just need to give them the tools to succeed. So I think, I think that sometimes the most genuine moments that you have with a hotel or a restaurant or a spa team aren't because they were taught to smile. It's just because that's who they are.
Right. And I think you hit the nail on the head when you said attitude is everything, because you can train someone how to use a computer, but you can't train someone who has a giving heart. And I believe in hospitality, you have to be a giver. You have to also take initiative and take personal responsibility. And that's where I feel a 5-star hotel really excels, is if you hear a guest say something, maybe he or she is in need of something, and you hear that, maybe you go to that department and say, oh, I heard Mrs. So-and-so say she likes this or could use this. I'll give you a very quick example. One of the first times when I started my business, I traveled to the Four Seasons, Las Colinas. And oftentimes I travel alone for business. So I'm sitting there in the restaurant reading a book, back in the days when books were still before the Kindle and all of that. And the server noticed that maybe I didn't have enough light at my desk, or at my table, excuse me. So he came up to me with a silver tray, and on the silver tray was an itty bitty book light.
Very nice. Very nice, right?
And of course I wrote a letter to the manager of the hotel, but yes, it's the little things. It's the details that make a difference. And
so
yes.
Even actually with beyond that, we at Forbes Travel, we call those like little golden nuggets. So we encourage all of the staff to capture a golden nugget. And a golden nugget isn't a piece of information that we explicitly ask for. Are you alert? Do you have any dietary restrictions? Are you celebrating anything special? But if you say you're celebrating a birthday and we give you a birthday cake, well, that wasn't a golden nugget. We asked the question, we got the answer, and we sort of set the expectation up. If we find out something about you that you just happen to walk by and hear my favorite thing is coconut. All right, and then we're able to personalize that birthday cake with some coconut ice cream or something. All right, well, that's the golden nugget. So can you train your brain to just listen to those tiny little details that as a guest, they might seem totally inconsequential, but yet that's probably going to be the biggest blow away. I'll share one really quickly. I was at the Ritz-Carlton in Dallas a couple weeks ago. And as I walked out of Fearing's restaurant, the host had said to me, how did you enjoy everything? Oh, it was fantastic. It's the only thing my only complaint is that I need a wheelbarrow to take me back to my room. And I sort of laughed at it. And then a couple of days later I came back to the next day I came back to my room, and there was actually a barrel filled with an old fashioned and a little note card that said, although we didn't have a wheelbarrow, I actually thought that you would appreciate a barrel. Enjoy, we know you had a day of training, so enjoy an old fashioned on us. And Arsenio, who is the host, and thought, oh my gosh, that's crazy. I just said one word. I just said wheelbarrow. And he thought, what can I do with this? And just created that real moment of a surprise and delight, which is that's it, right? It's that moment.
Yes, and that's why I think hospitality has everything to do with etiquette, because when I teach etiquette, I always say you have 2 ears and 1 mouth, so you should be doing twice as much listening.
Right.
So that person clearly heard what your need was, or maybe just wanted to make your stay even that much better. But of course, they knew who you were too. But hopefully, they do that for everyone. Well, I know we're just about out of time, so I just want to end with one more question, and I have to ask this question because our world is changing so rapidly, and because of COVID, we have not been traveling a lot. But thank goodness we're all getting back into that mode of wanting to travel. We all have cabin fever. We want some sense of normalcy, and I believe too that there's so much competition out there. Not only do 5-star hotels and spas and resorts have to compete against one another, but then you've got your Airbnbs, you've got your VRBOs, and of course they have their audience too. We all know that. But what sort of where do you see the luxury resort market heading now that there is so much competition, now that we are going into a new normal? What are some of your predictions?
Well, I mean, what a great question. So, my short-term answer is, it's been really encouraging to see the amount of demand at the luxury level, at that 4 and that 5-star now. We hear of properties running 100%.
Oops, I think we lost Jeff. Oh, here he comes. I think he's going to. Yeah, there we go. Okay, just a second. Yep, just a minute. One moment. There you are.
There I am. I think when we toggle back and forth, we lose each other. So, we hear of properties that are, doing like extraordinarily well. That guests who haven't had a vacation in a year are willing to make the splurge. And so, or just to be taken care of. We see like fine dining restaurants coming roaring back after a year of menu planning and washing dishes and cooking your own food. Like people just want to be waited on and served. So if there's a time to enter this industry, it's it. And I also like the idea that what we're seeing is a lot of creativity of like rethinking like processes and procedures and areas of a hotel or a restaurant or a spa that may make it a bit more COVID approachable, or that we put safety first, but not compromising any aspect of an experience, and that if you voluntarily left your house, you're basically in. Right? You didn't go and check into a hotel and pay hundreds of dollars a night to not do anything. So I think that through decades, properties like a Ritz-Carlton or a Four Seasons or a St. Regis have developed that sense of trust with their guests. With regards to like where the industry is going, what I particularly like about it is that there's a little something for everybody. And I know it's not necessarily a resort, but when I think of, our 5-star hotels just in New York, you can go to someplace like the St. Regis, which is like, the gilded ceilings and the crystal chandeliers and, your butler. And you may love that and think like that's what really great 5-star service is. Or you can go to the complete opposite, almost 180 degrees, and go to the Park Hyatt, where it's going to be super sophisticated and clean and modern. And maybe that's more your style. So I think what I like about it is that there's not one definition of what a great hotel or a great restaurant or a great spa should be. It should just be about capturing your personality and be able to have a guest experience that in like all aspects of their stay.
I know, and when people say they want to travel, I think the difference between an ordinary experience and an extraordinary experience is that when you check into a 5-star hotel, you don't feel like you're at home. You don't want to feel like you're at home. You want to be away from home.
Right.
We're tired of being home. We want to have that experience.
Sure. You're done talking to your house plants, like you're ready to go out, right?
Absolutely. So Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And
Pleasure.
we'll find out more about the Forbes Travel Guide.
Well, you can very quickly just go to, or very simply go to ForbesTravelGuide.com to look at all of our star-rated inventory. And I would definitely encourage everybody, if you're on Instagram, to go to @ForbesTravelGuide to follow us on Instagram, where we post pictures of our great properties all around the world. And then if you're looking for something professional, then you can find us on LinkedIn both at Forbes Travel Guide and the page for my own department of Forbes Travel Guide Learning and Development. Or you can always link to me and follow me at Jeff Wiggs on Instagram too. So.
Well, I'm definitely following you and also Forbes Travel Guide, and you have a fascinating job. And I know every day is different and it's a lot of fun, and you get to go to some exotic locations. So I personally am envious. Can the average person come to your facility or office and take classes, or do you just offer courses for hotels only and you go to the hotels?
As of now, we just work directly with our hotels and restaurants and spas and the other verticals in which we are in, but exploring the idea of bringing this out to individuals. You know, when we did our Hospitality Strong webinar series last April, when obviously the world was shut down, and we still wanted to continue that community and give, hospitality, those in hospitality, an area and a place where we could all connect and just refresh and continue to learn and to grow and to communicate. We found an amazing response. And so we're looking to continue something along the lines. We're working out the details of that.
I definitely think that could be beneficial to corporations. If they could apply the same hospitality principles that you apply to hotels and resorts to corporations, wow. I mean, that would make everybody's experience so much better. So we'll sit tight for just a second, and I'm going to say goodbye. And thank you, everybody, for joining us. And again, thank you, Jeff. It has been such an honor and a pleasure to
thank you
today. So I appreciate it.
Thank you for the invitation.